Hey, this is Paul McKay with the Four, here with David MacLeod and Giorgio DiNardo out of Ottawa, here to talk about what is happening in the commercial real estate world in Ottawa, specifically as it relates to businesses that are looking at Ottawa for a potential location or are in Ottawa and want to know what's happening in the marketplace. How are you guys doing today?
Fantastic, Paul. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm actually super interested to hear what's going on. Obviously, we know a little bit about it because we're collaborating on some projects together, but that's throughout COVID, Ottawa has been specifically a focal point on, things that have happened and things that are going on. But coming back with work from home, I'm anticipating, a large presence of the government in Ottawa. What have the trends been? Is it or similar to other cities where it's kind of a more vacant downtown, but the suburban markets are doing good because of work from home, or like you tell me?
Well, to provide some context on how big the federal government here is in Ottawa. So our competitive office inventory in Ottawa is about 40 million square feet. So I would say competitive, we don't include any government-owned properties, right. And especially in the downtown core. So that's all pulled out. So it's just, owned by private owners or institutions of that 40 million square feet. So we have our stats at 40% of that. So about 15 million square feet is occupied by federal government tenancies. Wow. So we really play in a competitive market of about 25 million square feet. So it's a significant portion of it. And then in the downtown specifically, we have about 18 million square feet of competitive office space, and close to 50% of that is the federal government. So they have a huge presence downtown, and it's kind of spread out through all of Ottawa. But obviously, 9 million square feet of that 15 is right in the downtown core.
Yeah. So federal employees, are they mandated to come in a certain amount of time right now, or is work from home pretty rampant?
Yeah, so they were mandated to come back two times a week. They're actually striking right now to fight against that. So what we like to call the feds is the domino effect. They run the downtown core, so the secondary and tertiary services downtown aren't getting what they need. So we're seeing retailers close down, more private directed tenants on ground floor, kind of shutting down services, et cetera. So all that to say, we need the feds to come back, especially in the downtown core. To your point, that does bleed into the suburban market. So we're seeing the downtown vacancy quite strong. Yeah. But the suburban office market is doing a lot better, especially in that 3,500 to 4,500 square foot range. We're seeing a lot of flight to quality as these nicer Class A sublets come to market.
And so the downtown stuff, is it predominantly local private investors that own the buildings, or is most of it like kind of institutional investors that are nationwide? What's the composition of the ownership types?
It's many institutions. There's really like one private capital family that still owns a good portion of downtown Class B and C buildings. So they've been able to hang on to the real estate for generations. But a lot of it is a lot of the same players that you guys would have in Calgary or Toronto or something like that.
And if you're a company in Ottawa right now, it's probably sounds like it's a very good time if you know what you need to negotiate or renegotiate a deal. Have you seen the turbulence of what the federal government's doing relate to like lower rental rates and more incentives and just a better deal atmosphere for tenants that have some certainty behind them?
Yeah. So if you're going to these institutional landlords, they want to keep their face rates relatively high. That affects the financing of the building, all that fun stuff. But what they're doing is they're throwing insane concessions at the tenant, right? Like we just received an offer for 9 months free net rent, and the TIs are creeping into the $50 around here, even 75. So what they're doing is they're buying deals right now with the anticipation that the market will uptick. However, that will be heavily dependent on the federal government.
Yeah, they've already given back big chunks of lower end Class B space and just vacate it altogether. And they're looking at their entire footprint. They already had a mandate to reduce in size by an X percentage. I forget what it was. And what they've said at like the real estate forum and the public works keep saying is that COVID's just really accelerated that shedding of space. Yeah. So right now for Q1 of 2023, our Class B vacancy rate downtown was at 18.9%. So we're gonna, there's a lot of buildings coming online that with big pockets of vacancy, and we expect that trend to continue.
And then just to Giorgio's point, you're seeing the face rates for the institutional landlords stay, market pre-pandemic with big concessions, but you're seeing the private equity give lower face rates, but not as many concessions, right? So you're kind of seeing this dynamic between the private guys and the institutional guys. It really depends on the motivation of your client. So if you're dealing with the CFO, they want to see that low face rate, right?
Yeah.
But you're dealing with the person that wants to bring back the employees to retain, recruit. You're seeing the institutions, they're taking advantage of the large concessions they're offering to make that cool, funky office space come back.
And have the different landlords started to amenitize buildings that maybe didn't have your conference facilities and gyms like we're seeing most of the places? Like that's already probably started, or is that a trend that's continuing?
Yeah, so I think in Ottawa, you're starting to see that, especially with the institutional landlords. They really want bums back in seats, so they're getting creative with their buildings. Whether it's like wellness center, free conference center, discounts on the gyms or amenities within the complex.
Yeah, the Class A buildings have really tried to step up their game in renovating common lobbies and adding some more amenities. The building that we're in, that our office is in, has access to our light rail system. So in anticipation of that, they put a lot of money into making a new lobby, doing a really good job on a food court, adding some nice new restaurants. So everyone's and they've done a good job holding their vacancy pretty low. And then the other downtown Class A groups have kind of piggybacked on that and doing it in their own facilities.
Are you seeing demand for most of the landlords to start negotiations earlier than normal in Ottawa? A blended extent, something that everyone's kind of getting ahead of the curve and doing, or is there just so much uncertainty that some of the REITs may have a hard time writing down deals early, but they'll do a deal early, but they won't necessarily blend it early? What are you seeing on that front?
I think you're seeing guys like us push that, right? So we're giving our tenants a call when they're 3 years out, and we're saying, hey, make a move now while the market's soft. And landlords weren't very receptive during the pandemic because they thought it would be over a lot quicker than it actually was. So yeah, to answer your question, 100%. Guys like us are approaching our tenants 3 years out, potentially blending, extending, or getting that flight to quality, or just, hey, let's get a new deal done. 5 years, we can offer 7. The landlord looks at that, and they're beyond happy to have some commitment for that amount of term.
And what do you think? What do you think the future has in store? Is it completely unknown because it depends on the utilization of the federal government on use of space? And I mean, do they plan on letting a number of leases go back to the market over time? Is Ottawa downtown probably a slow bleed of additional vacancy just from the federal government, and then you've got your work from home trends that we're seeing across North America on top of that? Or do we think that they've probably given most of their space back, if they're giving it back, and nobody knows where a bottom could potentially be, but it's not going to be amplified by federal government leases lapsing and people not utilizing that space and it coming back to the market?
Yeah, no, I think there is going to be more shedding of space from private sector and public sector groups. And what I've speaking with a few different landlords, in the Class A and Class B, is that now they've had 3 years of COVID. They've kind of figured out what they're not doing short-term deals of 2 year deals. That they've figured out, okay, we don't need 20,000 square feet anymore. Maybe we need 7 or 8, but let's make it really nice space. Yeah. So it's going to be continuing of shedding of space, but they're going to keep some portion that they deem is going to help them moving forward and be a sufficient size, but they're going to make some really nice space and do some wholesale changes for the offices and open concept. And each industry is going to be different, from law firms to tech to consultants. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I think for the feds, they're really coming out of those lower end B minus buildings, but it seems like they are staying put in those and higher end A buildings that offer amenities that have that have some green initiatives. They are looking to extend leases there, which is positive. So it's kind of going to be those lower end buildings. And we've seen some, similar to Calgary, some conversions of Class B office towers into res. One which is kind of on the fringe of downtown, on the far west end. They're almost complete doing their office to rental conversion now, and I think it's done pretty well.
And that's hard because a lot of buildings don't make sense to do that. And I was going to say, adaptive reuse of certain B and C class buildings is going to be forced upon everybody once, this work from home kind of and utilization of space trickles into people taking nicer, lesser space, and A class buildings and double A class buildings fill up. Do you know if the rental conversion is that something that the city of Ottawa is subsidizing and promoting, or do you know if that was like a market transaction where somebody just did it on their own right?
I know that the city is encouraging it for sure. We already have a housing supply shortage here in Ottawa, just like everywhere else. So they are 100% encouraging that. Now, subsidization, I can't speak to that, but I would imagine they are as a result of the crisis.
And what are the other kind of big industries? Like, are there any other big industry trends you're seeing in Ottawa right now? I mean, outside of industrial, it's kind of hot everywhere.
Yeah.
Is it your basic professional service firms, or is there any specific industries or like big capital projects or, big construction projects that are notable to talk about right now?
Just aside from industrial, not too many. Just like everywhere else in Canada, we're sub 1%. We're seeing a lot of development coming, but we can't keep up with the requirements. So we're seeing a lot of tertiary markets taking on industrial, like Carleton Place, Cornwall. You draw a 300-kilometer radius around Ottawa. You have the States, you have Toronto, you have 500 States, Toronto, all that fun stuff. So we're seeing a lot of these logistics and industrial users bleed to the secondary, tertiary markets around Ottawa. And there is an interesting dynamic in the west end of Ottawa, which is known as Canada North. So we like to say it's Canada's largest tech park. I think it's by GDP metric. And out there, it's performing well out there. But we are seeing vacancies start to rise because, a lot of these engineers and staffs, they're introverted individuals. They prefer to work from home as well.
Right.
So again, we're seeing a flight to quality out there, but our big industry beside the industrial here in Ottawa is the technology field. So anything west from, the deal we're doing at Queensview is very tech influenced. You have your live, work, play, LRTs out there, and your C-suite executives generally live out in the west end of the nicer houses, we'll say, right?
Yeah. And just to add to that, so the big push for Canada would be telecommunications. A lot of that's like old Nortel engineering. So we have big pushes for 5G innovation. So Nokia's out there, Ericsson, Ciena, Mitel, and the Ontario government just gave a ton of money to Nokia for a new research and development lab. So they have a building they own with a large parcel of land that they're looking to build on that. And then I just saw an announcement that Ericsson's going to put a lot of money into their Ottawa facility for new research and development. It's all around 5G, which is, going to shape how the whole world works. Right.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to compare. Maybe we do this on our next conversation, that park to what's happening in Waterloo, because the technology industry has been hammered and the venture capital industry has been hammered in the last 12 months. And we've seen layoffs in most places, everywhere across North America. We're talking to people, and it'd just be interesting to like kind of have a sub comparison of what's happening out there versus maybe what's happening in Waterloo on a bigger. I think Waterloo is the other major tech market outside of Toronto and Vancouver and now Calgary in Canada, anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. I go ahead.
I was just gonna throw the question, like the ball in your court there, Paul. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, you're seeing the rise of tech. However, you're seeing some layoffs. Is that strategic from the C-suite executives? Is that because people aren't going to work, or is it because we're seeing some economic downfall moving forward?
I think all of the above. These individuals that are, like the tech industry was so competitive for talent throughout COVID and so flexible on work from home as a result that I think we're seeing the hangover of COVID and capital markets and, people working from home, whereas a tech company that took a bunch of space is realizing that there's probably some layoffs anyways. They were probably overstaffed regardless.
Yep.
B, they have a low utilization of space. So in a tight financial market, it's easier to downsize and be a little bit more cost conscious. And it makes it easy, especially when you have people working from various locations, and work from home is something you've proven that you can do. So I think out of all the companies that have proven that, they might be a little bit more apt to collaborating, online. I think technology companies fit that bill. So for all these reasons, you're going to see a ton of space come back in Seattle and Vancouver and all major tech markets, Silicon Valley. I don't know as well, but the conversations I've had about, Vancouver and Seattle recently are just that those markets have been so tight for so long, and that these tech companies, working remotely in most locations, are letting so much space back. But a lot of that space is tied up by, the two giants, Microsoft and Amazon. And Facebook, so three, and depending on what they're doing from a work from home front over the next number of months will kind of also help dictate the market as well. But
sorry, Paul, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, we're seeing tech downsizes everywhere.
Yeah, and that leads me to believe, like, will we not see the outsourcing to cheaper countries if you can work from home and online and they have the same skill set? Like, is that not a worry?
I believe so. I'm not qualified enough to comment on from. We have an individual on our team recently moved here from India. And I know, like, I'm asking him, is like, do you have somebody that can, help us on an admin front while we're sleeping? And I think the globalization of professional services is becoming more abundant, whereas the onshoring of more manufacturing industrial is the opposite direction.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know well enough to be the expert in that field.
Gotcha. It's just it's a thought that I often crosses my mind.
I think it's becoming more prevalent. And, if we did an exercise with a client recently that they're setting up more of a hub and spoke model, and they wanted to understand of where the best and least expensive and most effective from a cost standpoint, administrative center could be located. And, all of those locations were they're all overseas. And some of the most least expensive didn't necessarily fit them on a cultural front, on what those geographic regions accepted on like a human rights front, and they ended up picking a location that was in India of all places. So I think there's a lot of back and forth in certain different regions for sure.
Right. Yeah.
And we've seen a couple, like in Calgary, where I say we've seen a couple technology companies specifically come from India more recently. And one of the things that we're looking forward to doing is kind of ballparking like why you go to different cities in Canada, whether it's for talent or for cost or for quality of life, cost of living, and so on and so forth. But I think the one thing we're seeing from a couple clients is people generally just choosing Canada specifically because our immigration policies and abilities and probabilities of bringing, specifically talented staff in are easier and more cost effective than other jurisdictions, like namely the US.
Right.
So I think that's a benefit we have in Canada on an immigration front. So we've got a group that's moving to Calgary, and they want to fill their roles with as much people as they can from Calgary on a tech front. But if they can't, they also, part of the equation was choosing Canada because they can't fill them. They know there's a bigger guarantee on their investment to put towards visas and immigration than there is in other jurisdictions. So I think that's a positive thing. We've got Canada moving forward.
Right.
Awesome. Well, I think that's great for today, guys. I really appreciate it. We'll have you back on for the kind of the next quarterly, and we'll get your quarterly report, which we'll kind of reference too. And thanks again.
Hey, Paul, thank you very much. This is fantastic. Look forward to doing more of these.
Absolutely.